We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with Tim Donner, Graham J. Noble, Jeff Charles, and Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, unraveling the red wave that never was. Now, in the last segment, we talked about what happened during the elections. But now I want to do a round robin on what race really surprised you the most. And just so no one takes my pride of place here, I'll go first. So for me, it was Lee Zeldin in the New York gubernatorial against Kathy Hochul. Now, yeah, he lost, absolutely, but it was getting close. And I think it finished just under 6% difference between him and Hochul. And when you consider how many diehard Democrats there are, I think he performed incredibly well. I mean, everyone came out against him, didn't they? You had the media against him, you had the big guns of the Democratic Party with their endorsements, and pretty much a campaign of terror from the White House about, as was mentioned earlier, about the GOP in general. For me, that was the big surprise of the night, that he did as well as he did. Jeff, you can take the next one.
You know, we're going to go to the South, in South Texas, where I'm in Texas. I'm not in South Texas, but we had 3 highly anticipated races involving Latinas running on the Republican ticket. We had Mayra Flores, Monica de la Cruz, Cassie Garcia, and 2 of them lost. And the one that's most surprising to me is Mayra Flores, because she originally won back in June in a special election. And she was getting pretty popular on the right. And then Texas did some redistricting in a way that gave her opponent, Vicente Gonzalez, the advantage. So she ended up losing her race. And what's interesting is that redistricting also contributed to the win of Monica de la Cruz. So, I mean, it's kind of a wash there. But those races were highly anticipated because they were expected to show how much ground the Republican Party has gained with Latino voters. But even the fact that they did fairly well in their elections shows that they are making up ground. I mean, the last race was against Henry Cuellar, who is very popular in his district. He's been there since 2005. And he tends to lean right on some issues like abortion and the border. So it's not a surprise that he won.
The last pro-life Democrat in Congress, I believe. That's self-styled Monica.
That's
true.
true.
I wish I'd chosen your one, Jeff. Your one's much more analytical than mine. All right, let's go to Scott's laughing at me, so we'll go to Scott next. Go on.
I am surprised that Fetterman won in Pennsylvania. Oz did no help to his own candidacy in the last couple of weeks of it. It seems like stumble after stumble, but still the idea of, and I'm somebody who I'm perfectly capable of voting for somebody, not because of them, but for the leadership that they'll vote for, and then how that'll affect the country. So a vote for Chuck Schumer versus the future leader of a Republican Senate, I get that. But also, his communication difficulties are so profound. It just, I'm just really shocked that there's that many people in Pennsylvania who also don't seem to care about the candidate and just seem to care more about, they're on Team Blue, and so they're going to vote blue.
It's almost a cruelty, isn't it? I mean, that's the way it seems to me. Am I wrong in that? What do you think, Graham?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was definitely one of the biggest shocks of the night, surely, for everybody. I mean, I did not expect, and again, I was never exactly a huge fan. I was of Dr. Mehmet Oz, but I still have a hard time getting my head around the fact that Fetterman actually won that competition. And of course, was it partly down to the this early voting, which is getting ridiculous, where we now have election seasons, not even election weeks or election months, but election seasons. It seems that I'm sure people are already out there in some parts of the country voting for their presidential pick for 2024.
So, Graham, what's your big shock for you then?
Well, several really. I must admit, I actually did believe that Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan would lose her race. I don't know, while I don't know an awful lot about Tudor Dixon, it seems to me that Whitmer one of the most extreme governors, well, perhaps along with Kathy Hochul as well in New York, but she was one of the most zealous about grabbing for herself all kinds of, extra powers, emergency powers, and then clinging onto them. And she seemed to run Michigan almost like some kind of quasi-dictatorship. And I honestly expected her to not win re-election. So that was a shock for me, that one.
That's a good call on.
I think, though, that, Mark, to me, the biggest surprise, other than Fetterman, which is, I said to myself when I got up this morning, I can't believe I live in a country where a guy like John Fetterman, who begins a debate by saying, good night, can actually win. But it shows you, as others have discussed, that if you've got
VP material, if we're going by current standards,
if you've got a pulse, you will be elected by Democrats. Maybe it's true with Republicans too. But to me, the biggest surprise of all has to be Florida, because everybody knew DeSantis was going to win. Everybody knew Rubio was going to win. But you figured DeSantis by maybe 10 points, 11. He won by 20 points. I mean, he became king of Florida. And beyond that, Marco Rubio won by 16 points. This makes Florida essentially like Alabama politically, because incredibly, this state, which for so long was the most crucial swing state in the country, now has not a single elected Democratic official in the entire state. No statewide officials are
Tim,
Democrats.
how many of those 20 points that DeSantis won by were from people who 4 years ago were not residents of the state of Florida?
Well, probably a lot. And I'll tell you what, DeSantis barely eked out a victory over a candidate, Andrew Gillum, 4 years ago, who wound up being a total mess personally, got caught with prostitutes and drugs and all kinds of stuff.
Not to mention the numerous indictments he's facing.
So he won, I think DeSantis, I think the number was that he won by something like 60 or 70,000 votes 4 years ago. Last night, he won by like 1.5 million. So to me, the utter domination of the GOP in Florida is the biggest surprise. And it makes me believe that at this point, DeSantis doesn't even have any choice but to run for president. And I think the other surprise for me is that the Trump-backed candidates, the ones who wouldn't have won their nominations but for Trump, and that would be Blake Masters in Arizona, who I guess still has a chance, but he's running behind Herschel Walker in Georgia, who's going to be forced into a runoff in a seat that they should have won. And of course, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriani, was a disaster as a gubernatorial candidate in the Keystone State. J.D. Vance was about the only one who actually came through, and that was because the governor there was so popular, DeWine, and he won by 25 points. But Ohio is underrated for last night, too, because those victories by DeWine and Vance solidify Ohio, along with Florida, as now being what you might call ruby red, blood red states. And that changes the electoral map.
Okay, and you're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, special midterm analysis here on the Radio America Network. We'll be right back after this break discussing Ron DeSantis and the Florida Blitz. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.